The galaxy was silent except for the low hum of Ethan Cross's ship as it drifted past the edge of a nameless star system. He had been traveling alone for weeks, carrying supplies from one mining colony to another, when a strange signal broke through the static of his comms. At first he thought it was just another broken beacon left behind by careless explorers, but the tone of the message was different. It pulsed with urgency, repeating again and again in an almost rhythmic beat, like a heartbeat echoing in the dark. The coordinates led him to a planet unmarked on any chart, a world wrapped in thick storm clouds and flashes of violet lightning. His ship's computer scanned the surface and declared, "No life signs detected. Possible error in signal transmission." Yet the signal was strong, too strong to ignore. Ethan knew better than to land on a planet his computer flagged as dead, but something about the call pulled at him, as if it wasn't just sound but a plea directed at him alone. He told himself it was his duty as a pilot to respond to distress calls, yet deep down he felt there was more, something waiting. Breaking through the atmosphere, he saw a vast jungle glowing faintly in the dark. Enormous trees twisted upward like the bones of giants, their leaves shimmering with strange bioluminescent patterns. Mist curled over the ground, and rivers of glowing liquid cut across the terrain like veins of light. Ethan set his ship down on a rocky plateau above the jungle floor. The signal pulsed louder, guiding him into the dense green maze. He carried only a flashlight and a small blaster, moving carefully while the air filled with strange chirps and metallic hums that seemed alive. Every step echoed as though the forest itself was listening. His boots sank into moss that glowed faintly beneath him, and every shadow seemed to stretch too long. He reminded himself that this was just a rescue. Someone's beacon was damaged, someone needed help, and he was here to give it. But the thought did little to calm the chill crawling up his spine. As he walked deeper, he began to notice how quiet the jungle became. The sounds faded, replaced by a silence so heavy it pressed against his ears. His flashlight beam cut through the mist, and for a second he thought he saw movement, something large shifting between the trees. He froze, raising his blaster, but nothing came. The silence deepened until it was unbearable. Then he saw them, two golden lights shining from the undergrowth, unblinking, watching him. His breath caught in his throat. The lights vanished as quickly as they appeared, swallowed by the mist. Ethan told himself it was just reflection from his flashlight, but his instincts screamed otherwise. He pressed on, following the signal that now felt less like a beacon and more like a lure. His computer scanner kept repeating the same line in his earpiece, "No life signs detected." Over and over until the words began to sound like a warning. At last he reached the source. A small metal device half buried in vines pulsed with blue light, its energy core still alive. It looked nothing like human technology, its surface covered in alien patterns that glowed faintly. Ethan crouched to inspect it, and as he touched the surface, the golden eyes appeared again, this time closer, just behind him. He spun, blaster ready, and the mist parted. What emerged was no human, no survivor, but a massive leopard-like creature unlike anything he had ever seen. Its fur shimmered as if woven from starlight, silver and blue patterns shifting across its body like constellations moving in real time. Its eyes blazed with a golden fire, intelligent, sharp, and terrifying. The creature limped as it stepped forward, blood dripping from its side, a deep wound glowing with faint traces of plasma burn. Ethan's heart pounded. His first thought was to shoot, but the animal didn't attack. It stopped a few steps away and lowered its head, its breath ragged, eyes locked on his. Ethan realized with shock that the signal he had followed did not come from survivors, not even from a ship. It came from this creature. The device was not a distress beacon, it was a trap or a call for help, and this alien leopard was at the center of it. Ethan's finger hovered over the trigger, but something in the animal's gaze made him pause. It wasn't rage. It wasn't hunger. It was pleading. For the first time since landing, Ethan felt the weight of the jungle's silence break. The world around him seemed to hold its breath as man and beast stared at each other, and Ethan whispered to himself, his voice shaking, "What are you?" The leopard's golden eyes glowed brighter, as though answering him in a language he could not yet understand. Ethan stood frozen, his blaster trembling slightly in his grip as the alien leopard limped closer, its massive body casting a shifting shadow against the glowing jungle. The wound in its side shimmered faintly with an unnatural glow, the edges burned as if cut by plasma fire, and with every movement the creature's breath came out in labored, ragged bursts. It should have been terrifying, this towering beast of silver and blue fur streaked with patterns like living galaxies, but what Ethan felt was not fear. It was confusion, a sharp pull in his chest, an almost human sense of pity for the suffering animal. He whispered again, "What are you?" And for a second he could swear the creature's golden eyes flickered in response, as if it understood the question. Still, instinct told him not to lower his weapon. He was alone, deep in a world that wasn't even supposed to exist, staring at something that should not exist, and yet here it was, bleeding before him like a lost soldier on a battlefield. The silence of the jungle pressed heavier, as though every tree and glowing vine leaned closer to witness what he would do. Slowly, the leopard sank onto its haunches, a low rumbling sound escaping its throat, not a growl, but something deeper, something mournful. Ethan hesitated, his mind racing with the rules he had always lived by as a pilot. Never get too close to the unknown, never trust alien life, and always put survival first. But another rule, an older, simpler one, rose from somewhere inside him: you don't leave the wounded behind. He holstered the blaster, keeping his other hand raised cautiously, and edged closer. "Easy now," he murmured, though he doubted the creature could understand his words. Yet as he moved, the leopard did not flinch, did not bare its teeth. It only watched, those golden eyes unblinking, filled with something Ethan could not name. He knelt beside the wound, and the smell of scorched flesh and metallic blood hit him hard. With careful hands, he unstrapped the small medkit from his belt and activated the sterile foam. The hiss of the device seemed loud in the stillness as he sprayed the wound, and the foam expanded, glowing faintly as it sealed the torn flesh. The leopard shuddered under his touch, and suddenly Ethan's vision exploded with light. For a split second he thought the jungle had erupted in fire, but then he realized it was inside his head, images flashing, rapid, impossible. Stars collapsing into black holes. Ships burning across the void. Planets shattered, leaving debris fields where life once thrived. And through it all, the same glowing golden eyes watching, crying out, fighting against shadows that swarmed like hunters. Ethan gasped and staggered back, the medkit clattering to the ground. His pulse hammered in his ears as the visions vanished, leaving only the jungle, the mist, and the wounded beast. "What the hell was that?" he whispered, gripping his head as if the images might still spill out of him. The leopard raised its head slowly, locking eyes with him again, and he knew with absolute certainty, that those visions had come from the creature. It had placed them inside his mind. Ethan's instincts screamed at him to run. This was no ordinary animal, no random predator dragged into a hunter's fight. It was something else, something older, something that carried memories across galaxies. Yet as he looked at it struggling to breathe, its fur trembling with each ragged inhale, he couldn't bring himself to leave. He forced himself to kneel again, hands shaking, and resumed sealing the wound. This time he braced himself, but no visions came. Only silence, and the quiet rise and fall of the creature's chest as the foam hardened and the bleeding slowed. When he finished, he sat back on the damp moss and studied it. The leopard blinked slowly, once, then lowered its massive head onto the ground, not in defeat but in something that almost looked like trust. Ethan let out a shaky laugh, part relief, part disbelief. "This isn't what I signed up for," he muttered, staring up at the glowing canopy above. "I thought I was coming here to fix a beacon, maybe patch up a survivor. Not this." The signal device pulsed behind him, steady and strong, but now it seemed less like a distress call and more like a heartbeat connected to the animal before him. Ethan wondered if the creature had activated it, if it had called him here on purpose. The idea was insane, but then again so was everything he had seen since landing. He leaned back against the tree, exhausted, his mind replaying the flashes of war and fire that the leopard had pushed into him. Were those memories? Warnings? A story too vast to be told with words? He didn't know, but the weight of it sat heavy in his chest. A sudden crack of branches snapped him out of his thoughts. The leopard's ears twitched, and its golden eyes darted toward the jungle's edge. Ethan stiffened, his hand going instinctively to his blaster. The mist shifted, and for a moment he thought he saw shapes moving between the trees, tall, armored, almost humanoid. His breath caught. Maybe he wasn't alone on this planet after all. He looked at the leopard, and for the first time he didn't see just an animal. He saw a survivor, a fugitive hunted for reasons he didn't yet understand. The creature pushed itself up weakly, wincing as it rose, and Ethan realized with a jolt that whatever was coming, it wasn't coming for him. It was coming for the beast. The jungle filled with a low humming sound, mechanical and sharp, and Ethan knew the real danger had just arrived. The rescue mission he thought he was on was a lie, and the truth was about to unfold whether he was ready or not. The mist thickened around Ethan as the sound grew sharper, a metallic hum that vibrated through the glowing ground beneath his boots. He gripped his blaster tightly, his breath shallow, every instinct screaming at him to retreat to the safety of his ship. But the ship was too far, and the Leopard, though wounded, leaned close to him as if tethered by some unseen thread. Its golden eyes blazed brighter, warning him, urging him, telling him to stay low. Ethan crouched, pressing his back to the thick trunk of a glowing tree, while the massive creature lowered itself into the moss beside him, its body trembling but silent. The jungle around them shifted unnaturally. Birds, or what had looked like birds, suddenly stilled mid-flight, hovering before darting away as if fleeing something greater. The humming grew louder until Ethan finally saw them emerge through the swirling mist, tall figures in dark armor, their shapes humanoid but twisted, their movements too precise to be natural. Each one carried a long spear that crackled faintly with blue energy, their helmets glowing with shifting symbols that flickered across their visors. They moved in a formation, scanning the jungle as if they knew exactly what they were hunting. Ethan's pulse quickened as he counted 4 of them, each step they took making the jungle floor vibrate. He pressed his body tighter against the tree, trying to make himself smaller, but one of the hunters paused, its head turning unnaturally sharp, like a machine locking onto a target. The golden eyes of the leopard widened, and in that instant Ethan felt something press into his mind again, an image, a command. Still. Silent. The thought wasn't his, but it echoed inside him as though it had always belonged. He didn't breathe. He didn't blink. He felt his heart hammering against his ribs so violently he was certain the hunters would hear it, but they moved again, scanning the ground with strange devices that sent ripples of light across the moss. The lead hunter stopped at the broken beacon pulsing faintly behind Ethan. It bent down, its long clawed fingers brushing over the surface of the alien device. The symbols on its helmet shifted, and Ethan felt the sudden chill of being caught. He held his blaster tighter, ready to fire if it turned, but the leopard pressed its head lightly against his arm. The touch was gentle, firm, and another image surged through his head. Fire, shadows, hunters like these dragging others away in chains, golden eyes dimming into darkness. He realized then with horrifying clarity, these things weren't here for him. They weren't searching for random prey. They were searching for the leopard, hunting it with ruthless precision, as if it were the last of something precious, something dangerous. The hunter straightened, its helmet glowing brighter, and for a terrible second Ethan thought it would look right through the mist and see them. But just as quickly, a call came from deeper in the jungle, a shrill, mechanical screech that echoed like a horn. The hunters stiffened, their helmets flashing in unison, and then they moved, gliding away into the fog with eerie silence, heading toward the sound. Ethan exhaled the breath he didn't know he had been holding, his lungs burning from the effort of keeping still. His hands shook as he lowered the blaster, and he glanced at the leopard, who was watching him with those unblinking eyes that seemed to know more than he ever could. "They're hunting you," Ethan whispered, his voice barely audible, though deep down he already knew the answer. The leopard blinked once, slow, and Ethan felt another surge of visions, this time slower, more deliberate. He saw cages filled with glowing creatures, saw experiments carved into flesh, saw hunters tearing through worlds and leaving nothing but silence. And then he saw humans, men and women bound in chains, their faces twisted in fear, their eyes wide as they were dragged into the same darkness. Ethan's throat tightened. The hunters weren't just after this creature, they were after anything alive, anything that held the spark of something rare. The visions ended as abruptly as they came, leaving Ethan gasping, drenched in sweat. He staggered back, his mind reeling, but the leopard rose weakly, limping toward the shadows of the trees. It looked back at him, eyes glowing faintly, and Ethan understood, it wanted him to follow. His instincts rebelled. This was madness. He should be running back to his ship, leaving this cursed planet and never looking back. But something deeper anchored his feet to the ground. He had seen the cages. He had seen humans inside them. This wasn't just about an alien leopard. Somehow, this was about his own kind too. Swallowing hard, he adjusted the strap of his pack, steadied his blaster, and followed the creature into the thicker jungle. The mist grew denser as they moved, wrapping around them like a shroud. Strange trees arched overhead, their branches pulsing with bioluminescent veins, casting shifting patterns of light across the moss. The air grew heavier, charged with static, and Ethan felt the weight of every step. He stayed close to the leopard, whose movements were slow but deliberate, each step pulling them deeper into a world that felt less like a jungle and more like a labyrinth built to conceal something ancient. At one point, Ethan thought he saw stone, shards of ruined walls buried under vines, carved with the same symbols he had seen on the hunter's armor. His stomach twisted as realization settled in. This planet wasn't uncharted. It was forgotten. Erased. Someone had buried its history under silence, and the leopard was the last fragment that refused to vanish. As they pressed further into the ruins, the sound of the hunters returned, distant but sharper this time, as if the jungle itself could not keep them away. Ethan's chest tightened with the knowledge that he had stepped into something far beyond him. This wasn't a rescue. This wasn't chance. He was standing in the middle of a war he didn't understand, tied to a creature that had chosen him for reasons he couldn't yet see. He glanced at the leopard again, and its golden eyes burned brighter, fierce with determination even through the pain. And though he didn't know why, Ethan whispered into the mist, "I'm with you." The words left his mouth before he could think, and in that moment, the leopard's gaze shifted, not animal, not even alien, but something deeper. Something human. The bond was sealed, and whatever truth lay ahead, Ethan knew it would change him forever. The jungle swallowed them whole as Ethan followed the wounded leopard deeper into the mist, its silver-blue fur glowing faintly with each strained step. The sounds of the hunters echoed behind them, sharp mechanical pulses cutting through the silence like knives, but the creature pressed forward with quiet certainty, as though it knew exactly where it was going. Ethan's lungs burned, his heart pounded, and every shadow looked like it could spring to life, but something stronger than fear kept him moving. He wasn't sure if it was loyalty, curiosity, or the strange bond the creature had forced into his mind, but he couldn't leave it now. The leopard limped across a ridge of moss-covered stone and stopped at a wall of tangled vines. At first Ethan thought it was just another part of the jungle, but then the creature raised its massive paw and pressed against the wall. The vines shivered, sliding apart as if obeying a command, revealing a hidden passage cut into the rock. A cold breath of air swept out, carrying with it the scent of dust, metal, and something ancient. The leopard stepped inside without hesitation. Ethan froze for a moment at the threshold, torn between survival and curiosity, then gritted his teeth and followed. Inside, the darkness gave way to a soft blue glow. The walls of the cave pulsed with faint lines of energy, symbols carved into the stone glowing as though alive. Ethan's breath caught. This wasn't just a cave. It was a chamber, old and alien, but still awake. His flashlight revealed fragments of technology half buried in the floor, consoles covered in dust but flickering with tiny sparks of light, as if waiting to be touched. The leopard collapsed near the center of the chamber, lowering itself to the ground with a pained growl. Ethan rushed forward, kneeling beside it, but before he could speak another vision surged into his mind, overwhelming and sharp. He saw beings that looked like the leopard, not as beasts but as towering, luminous figures, their silver fur woven with patterns of light that shifted like constellations. They stood upright, regal, their eyes blazing gold as they raised their hands over worlds filled with life. He saw them guiding civilizations, planting seeds of knowledge, protecting fragile species from destruction. Guardians. That was what they were, keepers of balance across the stars. But then the vision twisted, darkened. He saw hunters, the same armored figures stalking the jungle, invading the Guardians' sanctuaries, binding them in chains, tearing their light from their bodies. He saw cages filled with broken forms, experiments carving into their flesh, the golden glow of their eyes dimming into ash. The vision ended with fire, entire worlds burning, the Guardians' voices silenced one by one until only a few remained. Ethan staggered back, clutching his chest as the truth crashed over him. The leopard was not just an animal. It was one of the last of its kind, a guardian carrying knowledge that stretched across galaxies. The beacon hadn't been a distress call for survivors. It had been a plea for protection, for someone, anyone, to come before the hunters finished what they started. "You're not a beast," Ethan whispered, staring at the creature with awe. "You're a survivor." The leopard's golden eyes flickered in acknowledgement, and Ethan felt a faint warmth in his mind, not a vision this time but a simple wordless bond, like agreement. He looked around the chamber again, realizing it wasn't just a hiding place. It was a vault. The consoles, the walls, even the symbols, they were records, remnants of a civilization that had been wiped away. He brushed his hand over one of the panels, and it came alive, projecting shapes of stars into the air, a map glittering across the chamber. His eyes widened as he recognized patterns, systems near human colonies, planets marked with shifting lights. This wasn't just the story of the Guardians. It was a warning, a path. A secret the hunters would kill to erase. A sharp noise from outside snapped him back to reality. The hunters were close again, their metallic footsteps echoing through the jungle like war drums. The chamber's entrance pulsed faintly, as if reacting to their approach, and Ethan's blood ran cold. If they found this place, if they destroyed what was left here, the truth of the Guardians would vanish forever. He turned to the Leopard, panic rising. "They're coming. We can't stay here." But the creature didn't move. Its breathing was shallow, each rise of its chest weaker than the last. Ethan's throat tightened as he realized the wound was worse than he had thought. The creature had led him here not to hide but to pass something on. The Leopard raised its head, golden eyes locking onto his, and in a final surge of strength, it pushed into his mind again. This time the images were slower, deliberate. Ethan saw himself, standing where he was now, holding the map of stars. He saw his own face reflected in alien eyes. He saw the hunters falling, defeated, but not by weapons, by knowledge, by unity between man and Guardian. And then he saw the Leopard fading, its light dissolving into him. Ethan gasped, shaking his head. "No. Don't do this. You can't just leave this all on me." But the bond pressed harder, warmer, like a hand closing around his. It wasn't asking. It was giving. The hunters' voices rang out closer, a harsh mechanical language that rattled the cave walls. Ethan spun back to the map, heart racing. He didn't understand it all, but he understood enough. Star systems marked as targets, places the hunters would strike next. He thought of the humans he had seen in cages, the flashes of fear on their faces. This wasn't just the Leopard's fight. It was his fight too, his people's fight. He clenched his fists, fear twisting into resolve. "All right," he whispered, his voice trembling but firm. "I'll take it. I'll finish what you started." The Leopard's eyes glowed one final time, brighter than ever, filling the chamber with golden light. Ethan felt the warmth surge into him, searing, terrifying, and beautiful all at once. The creature's body trembled, then stilled, its fur dimming until only the faint glow of starlight remained in its patterns. Ethan knelt beside it, overwhelmed, as the last flicker of golden fire passed into him. The chamber around him hummed louder, the symbols burning brighter, and he realized with a shiver that the bond was complete. The Guardian's truth was now his to carry. Outside, the hunter's footsteps drew closer, shadows spilling into the mouth of the chamber. Ethan rose slowly, his blaster in hand, his heart pounding, his veins burning with something new, knowledge, strength, purpose. He had come here thinking it was just a rescue. Now he understood it was far more. This was a war, and he had just inherited the spark that could change everything. Ethan stood in the glowing chamber, his chest heaving, his mind ablaze with images not his own, his veins carrying the fire of something ancient that refused to be silenced. The alien Leopard lay motionless on the stone floor, its silver-blue fur dimming, its golden eyes now closed forever, yet its presence remained inside him like a second heartbeat. He could feel it, the echo of its thoughts, the weight of its memories, and most of all the crushing responsibility it had given him in its final breath. Outside, the metallic clatter of armored footsteps grew louder, filling the tunnel that led into the chamber, and the jagged hum of their energy weapons made the air itself vibrate. Ethan clenched his blaster, sweat dripping down his temples, but he knew ordinary weapons would never be enough. The bond with the Guardian had given him something else, something unexplainable, and as the hunter's shadows stretched into the cave, he felt the alien knowledge pulsing at the edges of his thoughts like a weapon waiting to be drawn. He had seconds to decide whether to stand or to flee. His instincts screamed at him to run, to find his ship, to escape into the stars and bury this nightmare, but the visions would not let him. He had seen the cages. He had seen humans and other beings chained like animals. He had seen whole worlds burning under the hunter's march. If he left, he would be abandoning not just the Leopard but his own kind to the same fate. The first hunter entered the chamber, its tall armored frame glowing with shifting symbols across its helmet. It raised its weapon, a spear crackling with blue fire, and for a split second Ethan thought his body would betray him and collapse from fear. But something surged from within, an invisible thread pulling from the core of his chest, and the symbols carved into the chamber walls ignited in response, glowing with fierce golden light. The hunter froze mid-step, its helmet flickering, as if reacting to Ethan's presence. The others filed in behind it, forming a wall of black steel and humming energy, and Ethan felt his breath catch in his throat. They weren't looking at him like prey. They were looking at him like they recognized something, like they saw the leopard's fire burning inside him. His hands trembled as the map of stars still hovered faintly in the air above the consoles, glowing brighter, projecting itself into the hunter's armor as if to mock them. Rage flared across their movements, and in unison, they advanced. Ethan raised his blaster and fired, the bolt slamming into one of their chests, but it bounced harmlessly off the armor, sparks scattering across the cave floor. The hunter's response was immediate, a spear hurled through the air, crackling as it buried itself in the stone inches from his head. He dove behind a console, gasping, heart pounding, but even as fear clawed at him, the fire inside him flared hotter, demanding to be used. He pressed his palm against the stone floor, and without knowing why, he thought of the visions the leopard had given him, worlds burning, but also worlds saved by the Guardian's light. He willed that light into his hand, and the stone beneath his palm erupted in golden fire that raced across the chamber like veins, striking the hunters in a blast of energy that knocked them back. Ethan stared at his glowing hand in disbelief. "What the hell?" he whispered, but there was no time to question. The hunters rose again, weapons crackling, their movements sharper, angrier. He could feel the leopard's presence in his mind, urging him not to think but to act, to trust the bond. The battle that followed blurred into chaos. Ethan moved faster than he thought possible, dodging spears that hissed with electricity, firing bolts from his blaster that seemed to strike harder now, as if infused with the same golden fire that pulsed through him. The chamber walls responded to his movements, glowing brighter with every surge, amplifying his strikes, shielding him when he stumbled. For every step the hunters took, the chamber fought with him, as though the ancient guardian had left part of its power embedded in the very stone. But there were too many. For every hunter knocked down by the golden blasts that shot from Ethan's hands, two more advanced, their armor gleaming, their weapons slicing the air. He felt exhaustion pressing in, the bond burning through his body like molten fire. His knees threatened to buckle, his lungs screamed for air, and sweat poured into his eyes, but the visions kept pushing, flashes of what would happen if he failed, chains, cages, the death of entire worlds. Finally, when the last of his strength seemed to drain, Ethan collapsed against the console, his body trembling. The hunters circled him, their weapons raised, their helmets glowing with triumph. He closed his eyes, expecting the final strike, but then he felt it, the leopard's voice inside him, not words, but a steady presence, calm and unwavering. A choice. He could let himself fall here, give in to exhaustion, and die with the Guardian's truth locked inside him, or he could embrace the bond fully, become more than human, and carry the fire out of this cave. The thought terrified him. He had no idea what he would become, no idea if he would even remain himself, but he knew one thing. If he refused, everything the Guardian had sacrificed would die with him. His fists clenched. His eyes snapped open. And he whispered, "I choose." The golden fire erupted. It wasn't just in his hands this time but in his entire body, a surge of light bursting from his chest like a star being born. The hunters staggered back, their armor flickering, their weapons shorting out as the cave filled with a blinding radiance. Ethan rose slowly, his eyes blazing with golden light, his voice echoing with two tones, his own and the leopard's. The hunters tried to strike, but the fire consumed them, their armor cracking, their bodies collapsing into the mist like ash. When the light faded, the chamber was silent again, the consoles humming softly, the ruins glowing faintly. Ethan dropped to his knees, gasping, sweat-soaked and trembling, but alive. The leopard's body was gone, dissolved into starlight, its essence fully part of him now. He stared at his hands, still glowing faintly, and knew his life was no longer his own. The Guardian's mission lived in him, their truth bound to his flesh. He had made the choice. And now the weight of entire civilizations rested on his shoulders. Ethan knelt on the cold stone floor of the chamber, his chest heaving, his entire body trembling from the torrent of energy that had torn through him, and for a long moment there was only silence, a silence so heavy it felt as though the planet itself was waiting. The last flickers of golden fire dimmed in his hands, retreating beneath his skin like embers vanishing into ash, but the heat remained inside him, steady and constant, a second pulse beating alongside his own heart. The hunters lay scattered around him, their once impenetrable armor cracked open, their bodies burned into lifeless husks by the radiance that had burst out of him when he made his choice. He stared at them, shaking, the truth settling deeper into his bones. He hadn't just fought them, he had become something they feared, something they were trying to extinguish. The guardian leopard's essence now lived within him, guiding him, changing him, making him the vessel for secrets and powers that were never meant for human hands. His throat tightened as he glanced at the spot where the leopard's body had lain, now only dust and faint sparkles of light drifting upward like fading stars. It was gone, but not gone. It was inside him now, and he knew it had given him not just its memories but its mission. The chamber pulsed faintly, the glowing star map hovering again in the air above the consoles, as though awakened by his acceptance. Ethan staggered to his feet, the pain in his muscles almost unbearable, but his mind clearer than it had ever been. He stared at the map, at the clusters of stars marked with symbols he now understood without needing translation. They weren't just points of light. They were warnings, places where the hunters had already struck, and others where they would strike next. Whole civilizations were in danger. His people were in danger. He had seen the cages, seen humans bound and broken under alien hands, and now he understood, they were not after resources or conquest. They were after life itself, rare sparks of consciousness, threads of existence that the hunters could harvest and twist. He pressed his hand against the console, and more symbols lit up, flooding him with knowledge. Somewhere out there was not just a weapon but a key, a hidden truth that the Guardians had tried to protect. That truth had now been entrusted to him, the last hope of both species. But even as the clarity set in, dread followed. The hunters he had destroyed were only a fraction of what was out there. He could feel it in the bond, echoes of countless others still marching across the stars, relentless, tireless, bound to silence anything that carried the Guardian's light. They would know what had happened here. They would come for him. Ethan's mouth was dry as he whispered to the empty chamber, "What am I supposed to do with this?" And though no voice answered, he felt the Guardian's steady presence inside him, not with words but with certainty. Carry it forward, or everything falls. A tremor shook the ground beneath his feet, dust falling from the cave ceiling, and Ethan snapped back to the moment. He had lingered too long. If the hunter's signal had reached their fleet, then reinforcements would already be on their way. He had to move. He stumbled toward the exit, his body still weak, but the fire inside him kept him upright, guiding him through the winding tunnel back into the misty jungle. The air outside was cooler, the bioluminescent plants glowing like rivers of light across the ground, but the serenity was shattered by distant thunder, the sound of engines, heavy and alien, descending from the clouds. His heart lurched. They were here already. He tightened his grip on the blaster, though he knew it was useless compared to the new power burning inside him. His ship was his only chance now, not to flee forever but to escape with the knowledge he carried, to bring the warning back to humanity before it was too late. He pushed through the glowing vines and twisted trees, each step slower than the last, his legs threatening to give way, but the fire kept pushing him forward. Golden flashes flickered at the edges of his vision, memories of the Guardian's strength seeping into him like whispers of encouragement. "Don't stop," he muttered, his voice raw. "Not yet." At last, the plateau came into view, and there, shrouded in mist, stood his ship, its hull gleaming faintly under the alien light. Relief surged through him, but it was short-lived. A new shape emerged between him and the vessel, another hunter, taller than the ones before, its armor glowing with crimson patterns instead of blue, its spear longer, its movement sharper. It had been waiting. Ethan froze, his heart hammering, sweat dripping into his eyes. He raised his blaster out of instinct, but the hunter struck it aside with a single sweep of its spear, sending the weapon clattering across the rocks. The alien advanced, its visor pulsing as though studying him, recognizing the fire in his chest. Ethan backed away, but there was nowhere to go. His ship loomed just behind the hunter, tantalizingly close, yet impossibly far. The crimson patterns on its armor glowed brighter, and it raised the spear high, energy crackling like thunder. Ethan's chest burned. He could feel the Guardian's presence inside him, urging him not to fear, not to yield. This was not the end. This was the beginning. He closed his eyes, focused on the fire, and let it surge. The golden light erupted from his body once more, brighter and fiercer than before, clashing against the hunter's crimson glow in a violent storm of energy. The ground shook, the jungle roared, and the mist shredded into ribbons of light as the two forces collided. Ethan cried out, not from pain but from the sheer weight of power flowing through him, and in that blinding clash he saw flashes of the future, himself standing on distant worlds, leading others, unlocking secrets long buried, facing endless battles but never alone. The Guardian's voice, faint but steady, whispered in his mind, "You thought it was just a rescue, but it was your awakening." When the light finally dimmed, Ethan stood on the plateau, trembling but alive, the crimson-armored hunter lying broken at his feet, its spear shattered, its armor smoking. He staggered toward his ship, each step heavy, but his resolve unshakable. He carried not just his own survival now but the survival of countless others. As the engines of alien ships rumbled in the sky above, he knew the war had only begun. But he also knew this: he was no longer just Ethan Cross, pilot and wanderer. He was the last Guardian's heir, the keeper of their truth, and the spark of their fire burned too brightly to ever be extinguished.